Hello class, welcome to our week 3 in our journey through the research methods. So I had a few tasks that we're going to try to knock out this week. I'm going to go through a short PowerPoint, which we see here, about what good research looks like. Okay. I'm then going to show you all how to find research. So I was able to log into the library and kind of go through the steps, and I'll take you all through those steps here on this video so you can see it, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the citation format. Okay, so I have this article posted in the folder that this PowerPoint is based on, but what I wanted to sort of introduce to you all this week before you start looking for your articles is what good research is. Okay, so if we take a look at this slide and you look at some of these numbers, right? If you use like a simple search engine, you're literally going to find millions to billions of articles, right? So what I'm trying to indicate to you all is there is an unbelievable amount of information, okay? Not all of it's going to be good. You're going to need to learn how to discern what a good article is from a not so good article. I don't want to say a bad article, but is the information accurate? And then is it going to give you information you can actually use, right? People's opinions, excuse me, that's not really what we're interested in this class. We're looking for facts that have been gathered through research. We're not looking for opinions. We're not looking for blog posts. We're looking for research studies and the papers that were created using those research studies. So really, I would not recommend to you all at all to use just a regular search engine to find articles. Now, I did mention last week you can use Google Scholar, because Google Scholar is a specific version of the normal Google search engine that will look for research articles. So that's okay to use, okay? And I would encourage you to use that, especially if you think the library sequence that I'm about to show you here in a little bit is complicated, which it kind of is. The downside of Google Scholar is the article might not be available and you need the whole article, okay? So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, okay? So some things I want you to consider when you're weeding through some of these articles, is who is the source? Who is responsible for the content, right? Whenever you see like a company name associated with the content, that should be a red flag, because that company probably has some vested interest financially in what the paper is saying. Okay, so always be skeptical of that. Ideally, you want to find papers that were produced at universities, okay, not by private businesses. Quality, was an editorial board used? Now, any article that you find on the library website or on Google Scholar is going to have an editorial board. So that's not something you really need to look at specifically for this class, but that's another factor, right? Articles for well-respected journals, which are journals are sort of compilations of research. Editors are going to review those articles before they're printed, okay? And they're going to pick the article apart and suggest that the author make some corrections or updates or whatever. But the idea is an author is not just going to write something and it's going to be published. There are going to be editors that are going to read it to make sure it looks okay. That's another factor that's positive, okay? Be a cyber skeptic. So, just if any article's making like a big dramatic claim, like this is the way, that is also a red flag. What you're going to see once you start reading research is they're going to use very guarded language, like in this study we found this, or while this may not apply to this population, it does apply to this population. Evidence suggests this is the case, right? Research articles usually avoid making very broad, like definite claims. They use very guarded language. So you want to look for that as well, okay? I mentioned opinion. We're not really interested in opinion or testimonials. We're looking for evidence. Evidence is data collected in a lab in most cases. Okay. Check for currency. Now, depending upon the topic you select, there might be very recent research done, or there might not be any at all. Okay. I would encourage you to, when you set your date parameters, to set it at the year 2000 and later. Okay. Although you might have to expand it a little bit. If you do that and you don't find enough articles, you might have to pull it down to like 1990. Okay. But mainly, you want to avoid articles from like 1950 because in most cases, technology has greatly improved since 1950, so data will be more reliable, etc. So you want to aim for recent research if possible. Only go back in time if absolutely necessary. The bias we kind of already mentioned when I talked about point number 1. Okay, confidentiality is not really going to come into play in this class too much. Any article that you get, there shouldn't be like names of subjects, right? The subjects should always be de-identified, which means you just have a population of females in this age group, right? It's not going to list Sally, age 28, etc., right? It's going to be very unidentified, which would then keep the information about the individual subjects confidential. Okay, so what else do we want to think about? Now, we're going to get into this here in a little bit, an experimental versus an observational study. For the most part in our class, we want to look for experimental articles, which means a specific study was designed and the subjects are going to participate in that study, okay? Conversely, observational would be you're just going to observe the subjects in an environment. Now, in exercise physiology, almost always we're using experimental research, and that's what I want to encourage you all to look for in your articles. Okay, the article I gave you as a sample is experimental because this specific rote protocol was designed and we made the subjects participate in an experiment using that rote protocol, so that's an experimental study. Okay, as far as subject characteristics, we are looking for human. Okay, some studies will use male, some will use female, some will use both. It doesn't really matter necessarily unless you're interested in a specific topic. You could sway one way or the other. The number, the bigger the number of subjects, the better. In exercise physiology, though, the research sample sizes tend to be smaller in size. I would look for at least 10 to 20 is a good number, I think, for exercise physiology. Okay. Health status, if you have a specific interest, make sure that you search for somebody that's either healthy or has a specific condition, right? If you want to find an article about healthy subjects, I would put healthy in the search parameters to make sure you're getting articles about healthy subjects. And what healthy means is they don't have any diagnosed diseases, okay? Assessment methods is looking at sort of the protocols that they use. We don't have to get into that too much today. We can maybe talk about that a little bit more once we get into the article presentations themselves. Time frame of the study, right? You want to make sure it's not like a day or even a week, but a study should last 4 to 8 weeks is maybe a good time frame to look at there. Okay. When you're reading the articles, then you want to make sure that the results accurately reflect the findings. Headlines can be deceptive sometimes, so make sure that the headline, which often states the results, matches the actual findings in the article. Limitations, I mentioned to you all last week, every study, regardless of what it is going to have limitations, so make sure that the limitations are noted in the study. And then lastly, there may also be a box in the paper that says if there are any conflicts of interest, okay? I know when I've submitted papers that I've written in the past, they always ask you to list any conflicts of interest that you may have. And if they're big enough, if they're severe enough, they won't publish the article. If they're minor, then they would be listed at the bottom of the article, okay? And again, peer-reviewed really kind of goes back to what I mentioned on the previous slide, which was, is there an editorial board, right? Major journals, they're going to have people review articles and critique them prior to publication. They might even reject them. I've had a couple of articles rejected from publication. That's just the name of the game, okay? So, but the reason it was rejected is because we didn't present a compelling enough case that this study needed to be published. So they didn't publish it, and that's fine. You just want to make sure that a review board has looked at the article, which again, most of the articles you all are going to find, that's not going to be an issue. Okay, so let's talk about some different study designs. I'm going to talk first about a couple I don't want you to use, and then we'll talk about what I do want you to use, okay? So one particular type of paper you might find is known as a case study, okay? Now, a case study is going to look at usually one single person participating in something, and the article is going to be written about that one specific person. Now, case studies are great teaching tools, especially in exercise physiology, like in your textbooks. Your teachers may use these case studies in classes. I have before in class as well, other classes. Good for teaching, they're not good for gaining a lot of information about in regards to research, okay? So, I don't want you to locate case studies for either of the projects in this particular class, okay? A second type of study that is valuable that I don't want you to use is what is known as a cross-sectional study. So what a cross-sectional study does is it's going to look at a big group of people at a specific point in time, okay? So say January 2020, and it's going to look at some try to establish some cause and effect relationships. So to give you an example, the title of this article might give you some insight into what I'm talking about. Reduce risk for overweight and obesity in 5 to 6-year-old children by duration of sleep, okay? So what this study did is they took this population of children at a specific time and they had them fill out a survey about their sleep study or their sleep quality, how long, how many times do they wake up, what time they go to bed, what time they get up, etc. And were they overweight or obese? And the correlation they were probably looking to find was the ones who had poor sleep quality had a greater risk of being obese or overweight. The ones that had better sleep quality were at a less risk of those characteristics, okay? So again, they're not really applying any experiment. They're just trying to draw correlations between lifestyle factors, okay? So again, I do not want you to use papers that sound like this. We're looking for experiments, okay? This last one that we don't want to use is kind of similar to this one, although what's known as a longitudinal study looks at people across time. The cross-sectional looks at one point in time. The longitudinal looks at a duration of time, okay? So imagine if here we checked in with these same kids every year for 10 years. That would be what is known as a longitudinal study, okay? So in the example I give here, we're looking at a population was studied over a 12-year period. As they aged, their skeletal muscle content of their bodies was observed to see if, as people aged, they lost muscle mass, okay? So again, no experiment is being done on these people. We're just looking at how does their lifestyle correlate to whatever factor it is that we're trying to study. Okay, now let's get to the two that we do like. For your first article that I want you to find, you need to find one of these. A randomized controlled study, or that's abbreviated as an RCT, okay? What we're looking at with an RCT is that there is a specific experiment or a treatment that is being applied to a group of people, okay? Like an exercise intervention, right? They're participating in this study. They're participating in battle rope training. They're participating in a specific resistance training program to see what their muscular adaptations are, right? We're looking at small group of people usually performing a specific experiment, and we're going to take pre-experiment measurements, post-experiment measurements, and see how the measurements changed based on their participation in the experiment. Okay, that's what we're looking for your article presentation. Okay, so after today, I want you to start looking for an article. You can send it to me and ask me if it's okay, and I'll approve it. Okay, if you feel pretty confident about it, you don't necessarily have to do that. So the article that I presented to you last time and the one I'll do my presentation on, those are examples of randomized controlled studies. Now, the final type of article that you might find is what is known as a meta-analysis. Now, a meta-analysis is going to look at data from a whole bunch of these. So it's going to take maybe 10 RCTs and sort of crunch the data from all of them to see if a general conclusion can be made about this specific topic, okay? Now, while I do not want you to use this for your article presentation, you can use meta-analyses for your research presentation, okay? In fact, your research presentation is going to sort of be like a meta-analysis. You're going to try to find 10 or so papers and see if you can make a general conclusion about the topic based upon what the data from these 10 or so research papers have found and presented, okay? So I have an example of a meta-analysis that I'll present to you all a little bit later in the term. And in my research presentation, I'll present to you prior to you doing yours, will be similar to a meta-analysis. Okay, now a meta-analysis can be a massive document. It might be a 50-page article because it might be looking at the results of 30 or 50 studies. Okay, a randomized controlled study article is usually much shorter. We're talking about maybe like 3 to 6 pages. Okay, so that's another way to figure out which is which. A shorter article is usually going to be an RCT. A longer article is going to be more likely to be a meta-analysis. Okay, so again, for your article presentation, I want you to use the randomized controlled study. For your literature review presentation, you can use both the randomized controlled studies and the meta-analyses. Okay, so before we get into the article search, while I have this up, let's look at the citation format. So what I want you to do, once you find your article, you're going to submit your reference. Okay, so what I provided here are 2 examples of references done in the format known as the JAMA format, or JAMA stands for Journal of the American Medical Association. So the ACSM, American College of Sports Medicine, this is the recommended citation format that they use. Okay, so let's go through these one by one. The difference here is this is two authors, this is multiple. They're exactly the same. I just wanted to provide you 2 examples. So how we're always going to list it is as such. Authors of the article are listed first. Last name first. First and middle initials capitalized, no periods. Oops, sorry. So again, lead author is first. Last name is listed first. Then we have the first and middle initial, comma. Second author last name with his first and middle initial. After you finish listing the authors, you put a period. Okay. Now the difference between this reference and this one is this one has maybe up to like 10 authors, which could be common. So what they've done is they have just listed the first 3 and then the abbreviation et al, which means and the rest, basically, was placed there instead of the rest of the names to keep it shorter. Okay, so if you have 10 authors listed, you can do it this way. If you just have 1 to 3 authors, you could list it like such. After the authors, we then list the title of the article. Resistance to exercise, overtraining and overreaching, neuroendocrine responses. Only the first letter is capitalized, not every other, no other word or letter in the title is capitalized. You put a period at the end. This particular article happens to have sort of 2 sentences in the title. This one, again, first letter is capitalized, no other capital letter is used, period is used at the end, okay? The next thing listed after the title is going to be the name of the journal. Now, you use italics for this, okay? Now, we also use abbreviations, and there are very specific abbreviations that are used for specific journals. So I want you to try to use the one that's recommended. So sports medicine is abbreviated as sports med. This one down here, Journal of Science and Medicine in Sport, which is abbreviated as J-Sci-Med Sport. So the word journal is almost always just abbreviated as a J, okay? Now notice here we are using capital letters to start each word, and again, you're going to use italics for this, okay? After the title of the journal, again, you put a period. What we next list is the year. So 1997 here, 2003. After the year, you're going to put a semicolon, and then the next number is going to be the volume or the edition of the journal. So this is volume 23. And then colon, pages 106 to 129. Down here, the year is 2003, volume 6, pages 295 to 306. Okay, so these use the exact same format. I just gave you two examples that are a little bit different. But this is how I need you to submit your reference to me. And then also when you create your bibliography later in the semester for the research presentation, every single reference should be in this format. And what you'll do is you'll alphabetize them using the first letter in the last name of the first author to alphabetize. So in this example, these would be in the proper sequence because Fry, F comes before K in the alphabet, okay? So if you have any questions about that, let me know. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Just essentially just copy the format here that I give you, okay? So what we're going to finish with then is I'm going to go to jump over to Schoology and show you where I have in the week 3 content folder, I have the assignment for you to submit your reference in the format I just showed you. The PowerPoints that we just went through are here. The article that I created this PowerPoint from is here if you want to read it. It's just an interesting thing you might want to look at. But then what we need to look at now is I have the directions for how to do the library search. So I'm going to open that. And then we'll walk through it step by step. All right, so you're going to go to the library website, and then I have a series of steps that you're going to have to do, okay? Now, I'm assuming at this point that you got your ID code, okay? I talked about that last week. If you don't have your ID code yet, what you need to do is go back to the week 2 content folder, which I'll just go to real quick. And it tells you how to do that here, right? So you could go to the library directly, and I don't think you have to worry about this. But if you access the library databases from your dorm room or your apartment off campus, you're going to need to have this barcode, okay? All right, so I'm going to go back to where we were, back to week 3. Open this up. Actually, here's what I'm going to do real quick. Pardon me while I just rearrange my desktop here. I'm going to open this up as a Word document so I can have it open at the same time that I have the window open that we go through this one. All right, so what I'm going to do is go to the library website first. There we go. Okay, so we're here. Haley Q. Brown Library Catalog. What I'm going to do next, point number 2, is I'm going to click Research Databases located in the thin black banner at the top of the page. So you see that thin black banner here, Research Databases. I'm going to click on that. Boom. All right. Next, I'm going to go to the letter combination of D and E because the database that we want to search is called EBSCO. And you see that written right here. So that falls into the letter E. So I'm going to click that right here. So notice I'm going to scroll about 3/4 of the way down the page. I'm going to click on the D and E right there. So that's step 3. All right, step 4, I'm going to scroll down until I get to EBSCO. Now this is alphabetized, so I didn't have to go very far, and I see EBSCO databases, but notice what it says here. If you're on campus, you can click that directly. From off campus, you have to click here, okay? So since I'm off campus, I'm in the state of Kentucky, I'm going to click here. If you're on campus, you might try clicking here, but maybe only if you're in the library. If you're like in your apartment or your dorm room, you might go ahead and do the click here. So I'm going to do that. It's then going to ask you to log in. So that's where I'm going to have my last name, first name. So you'll put that in, and then you're going to put in your library barcode. Okay, so I've just saved my name already. It's just like a 10-digit number that you'll have to put in. Once you do that, and I see that I don't have that listed on the steps, and that's because when I made this, I was already logged in. But this is good that you all are seeing this, because you may have to log in, and if so, this is where you need to put that barcode in. So I'm going to go ahead and hit submit. Now, this happened to me last time. If this happens to you, just go back, hit submit again, and then it pops up. I don't know why it does that. Okay, so what I want then is go back to our steps. Step 5, EBSCO host web, which is right here at the top. Now, if you're using your cell phone, you might try this. I don't know if I would recommend that. I would recommend doing this from a computer if possible, but if you're using your phone for this process, you might do the mobile. Since I'm on my computer, I'm going to select the web app. And again, I don't know why it does this. If it does this, just go back. Try it again. And it works the second time. Okay. So now we're going to scroll down. We're on step 6. We're going to scroll down and do Medline with full text. So I'm going to scroll kind of way down. It's in alphabetical order again. So here we are, Medline with full text. Okay, so I'm going to click on that button. And now we have our search, all right? So here's where you now need to search for the topic that you want to study, all right? So I'm gonna just pick an example. I'm gonna look at muscle hypertrophy. So what I would do is type that in the box. Click search. Okay, so notice how many it brought up. It brought up 16,000 papers on that topic, okay? That's a lot. So I'm going to probably at this point want to narrow my search parameters a little bit. One easy thing that we can do is the years. So notice right here, it's from 1898 to 2021. I'm going to change it to the year 2000. Okay, and then what I would do to apply that is just hit search again, leaving my topic in the box, and it's going to limit my, now I'm down to 10,000, so that's much more manageable, right? Yeah, not really. Okay, so that tells me I'll probably want to limit it even further. Okay, so let's pretend that I'm interested in the safety of muscle hypertrophy training with the youth population. So what I could do is leave in muscle hypertrophy, type in now youth, click search again, and now look, now I'm down to 16. That's good, right? Because now we have less to choose from. Now if we look at this list, the first one, neurogenic muscle hypertrophy in a 12-year-old girl. Well, guess what does that sound like? What type of paper is that? That's a case study. That's not a randomized controlled trial, so we're not going to use that one. If you just look at some of these titles, you know, this one says it's a meta-analysis. This one sounds like it's a meta-analysis as well. Okay, now this one looks good. Effect of block versus undulating periodization on strength and performance in adolescent football players. So that title tells me we have a small population, adolescent football players. There is a specific treatment that's being applied, basically different types of periodization, and the variables we're measuring are strength and performance. Okay, so that sounds like a randomized controlled study. Now notice some of these, it'll have here PDF full text. So if I click on that, it should bring up the paper for me. So there it is, okay? Now this is a good one. This is from 2019. There's an abstract. So here's where what we talked about last week, you might read the abstract. If it sounds like something you're interested in, use it. If not, look for something else, okay? How long is this paper? This is a pretty long paper, but notice that once we get to page 7, these are all references. So it's really only a 6-page paper. There's 3 pages worth of references, okay? Now, if you like this article, obviously you would download it and save it to your computer and use it, okay? Let's say that you don't like it. And let's look at another example, actually. So notice this one has the PDF. Some of these do not have PDF full text, so I'm going to pick one just to see what that looks like. If it doesn't say PDF, if I hit find it, what's going to happen? Again, if that happens, I would just close that tab, try it again. So it's going to show me some resources that may have the article available. These may or may not work, right? So I'll try one to see if it works. This might direct you to another website. Okay, so here we went to Science Direct. The article is available, and you can download the PDF. Now, some of these might ask you to pay for access, so let's see if that's the case here. Well, I don't know. So this one may not be available, actually. So I think that your best bet is to try to find articles where the PDF full text is available, because you know you'll be able to download it. You don't have to avoid others. Just know that you may not be able to get that article, and you might spend some time looking for it to discover you can't find it and then have to start back over. Honestly, that happens all the time, so don't get frustrated. That's just kind of part of the process, okay? And then the rest of these steps are kind of what I talked about narrowing the search process. All right, so to close it up, this step-by-step process is available in the Schoology Week 3 course content folder that I showed you. So you can pull that up and maybe open it and have it in a separate window like I have on my computer screen, and then just go through the processes, okay? And then again, the assignment due at the end of this week is just the reference of the article that you found that you like, okay? So send that to me. I'll look at them all, obviously, and make sure that they're the right type of article. And if they're not, I might ask you to find a different one, okay? But in the meantime, if you have any questions about what to look for, how to narrow down a topic or anything, just shoot me a message. Again, I would recommend using the Schoology messaging system because I see that much more frequently. Or use my U of L, louisville.edu email address, because I check that one all the time as well, okay? So good luck with your search. Don't get frustrated. Remember, try to make it as specific as possible. That'll help you find, that'll help narrow your searches down. Like we saw over here, remember I originally started with 16,000. I was able to narrow it down to 16 because I edited the limits to make it a more specific search, okay? So let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing the articles that you all come up with. Have a great week. Goodbye.